Okay, so welcome to this deep dive. You brought us a pretty intense source this time, and
Definitely intense.
yeah, we're really interested to take a look at it with you. So today we're diving into 100 Deadliest Karate Moves by Dr. Ted Gambordella.
And Dr. Gambordella is a fifth Dan in karate, which, that's a pretty high level of expertise.
Yeah,
He's obviously been training for a long time, and his book is dedicated to Demetrius Heavenus. So, it sounds like someone important in the martial arts world.
yeah, for sure. And he makes it really clear right from the beginning what this book is about. It's not some kind of theoretical exploration. He calls it a practical text for the serious martial arts student or teacher.
Yeah, so really for people who are already pretty deep into martial arts.
Exactly. And also there's this really strong warning right at the start as well. Like he's very, very clear that, these are not techniques to use in, everyday arguments or anything like that.
Right? Not for settling, a parking spot dispute.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he's saying like, only if there's a real immediate threat to your life should you even think about using these techniques.
Right, and he actually goes on to say that these aren't even his own moves that he's invented. He's basically compiled a list of techniques, and he's presenting them in a very specific way, where he outlines, like the specific kick or strike,
Right.
the exact target area on the body, and then the damage that it's likely to cause.
Yeah. So I guess our goal in this deep dive is to understand exactly that. Like, what are these techniques? Where are they aimed at? And what kind of damage does Dr. Gambardella describe?
Exactly.
And we're also going to look at, his examples of how these could be used in, a street fight kind of situation, but always within the context of the book.
Mm-hmm.
We're definitely not endorsing the use of any of these techniques.
Of course not.
Okay, so let's jump into it. When you actually start reading through the book, you realize that he kind of assumes you already know a fair bit about martial arts. Like he talks about stances and basic strikes, but he doesn't really go into detail.
Right, he's assuming that the reader already has a pretty good foundation.
Yeah, exactly. He's more interested in the actual, application of force to specific targets.
Exactly. And he's very clear about one thing. For any of these techniques to be truly effective, they have to be executed with the utmost speed and power. And that emphasis on speed and power, it comes up again and again throughout the book.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Now, he does start by outlining some fundamental kicking techniques, so maybe we can start there, just to get a sense of his approach.
Yeah, definitely. So one of the first ones he describes is the front snap kick. And he stresses the importance of, a high knee lift, keeping your fists clenched really tightly and pointing your toes upward. The idea is to deliver a really quick and direct snap of the foot to the target. And obviously using the power generated from your hips while maintaining your balance on a slightly bent supporting leg.
Yeah, makes sense. So what's next?
Then he moves on to the front heel thrust.
Oh, okay.
And he describes it as being similar to the snap kick, but with one major difference. The heel is what you're striking with. And that obviously allows for much greater force and deeper impact. You're basically driving your heel straight forward with a lot of force. And in this technique, your leg extends and locks straight, rather than staying bent. So you can imagine how using that solid heel just amplifies the power.
Yeah, you can really visualize that.
Yeah.
So, what else does he talk about?
Well, then there's the front snap high, which, as the name suggests, requires a lot of flexibility and balance. But Dr. Gambardella points out that it's really effective against higher targets, like the face, throat, and chin. So you can see how he's adapting the technique for different scenarios and different parts of the body.
Right, so it's not just like a one-size-fits-all kick.
Yeah.
You have to adjust it depending on what you're aiming for.
Exactly. Now, the side kick, he actually goes into quite a bit of detail on this one. And he describes two distinct methods. The first one involves, lifting your knee up really high to the front, curling your toes back to protect them, and then delivering this sharp snap and thrust directly to the side, using a powerful rotation of your hips. He's very specific that it should be your heel or the side of your heel that makes contact. And he even recommends keeping one arm raised to guard your ribs, and he calls this one probably the most devastating kick and the hardest to stop when done correctly, so he's clearly highlighting its power.
Wow, yeah, that's quite a statement.
The second method for the side kick, it uses a slightly less extreme knee lift, only raising it to about hip height in front of your body. And in this case, you actually look over your shoulder at the target and then thrust your heel directly backward again, emphasizing that hip snap for generating power.
So, it's interesting that he presents these two variations. It makes sense that they'd be used in different situations.
Yeah, like maybe for different ranges or depending on, the position of your opponent.
Exactly.
Okay, so is that it for the kicks? Or no, he also covers the knee strike, which he says is specifically for close quarters encounters. And, he claims that it can be really effective even against much larger individuals. It's basically just raising your knee directly upwards with as much speed and power as you can. And again, he emphasizes that you can really increase the impact by thrusting or snapping your hips forward at the same time. So even in these kind of basic techniques, you can see he's really focused on using your whole body to generate maximum force.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing things are going to get even more intense as we go on.
Oh, definitely. Because now the book transitions into a section called Vital Points and Kick Attacks.
Oh.
Yeah, and this is where the descriptions become very specific and honestly pretty brutal in terms of the potential consequences. For each numbered attack, he clearly states the type of kick, the exact target area on the body, the damage that it's likely to inflict, and the potential outcome for the attacker.
Okay, well, I guess we better brace ourselves and dive in.
Yeah, let's do it.
So what's the first one?
Well, the very first one is a front snap kick directed at the shin. And the damage he describes is, a broken or severely bruised shin bone. And the result is basically that the attacker won't be able to stand or continue fighting.
Wow. So right off the bat, it's pretty debilitating.
Yeah, very immediate impact. Then number 3 is a front snap kick to the kneecap. And here the potential damage escalates to a dislocated or fractured kneecap, maybe even some sprained and torn ligaments and tendons in the knee joint. And again, the result is that the attacker won't be able to stand or fight, but this time it's likely to require surgery.
Ouch. Yeah, that sounds pretty serious. It seems like as we go through these, the target areas are becoming more and more vulnerable.
Yeah, definitely. Like number 5 is a front snap kick aimed at the tailbone or coccyx.
Okay.
And the damage described is a fractured coccyx, which would result in, extreme pain. The attacker wouldn't be able to stand or sit comfortably, and they'd need medical attention. So you can imagine how much that would limit their movement.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so what's next?
Well, number 7 is a front snap kick directed at the ribs. And here the damage is, loss of breath and fractured ribs. The attacker wouldn't be able to breathe properly for several minutes and they'd probably collapse to the ground. So again, very debilitating.
Yeah, for sure. Now I have a feeling things are going to get even more intense.
Yeah, you're not wrong. Because number 9 is a front snap kick to the throat. And Dr. Gambordella actually states that the potential damage here is a crushed throat and a shattered Adam's apple.
Oh, wow.
And the result is that the attacker will likely die unless they receive immediate medical attention. So this is where we really start to see the deadly aspect of the book's title. These techniques are not messing around.
Yeah, that's really serious stuff. So are all of these kicks aimed at potentially fatal areas?
Well, not all of them, but many of them are. Like number 11 is a front snap kick delivered with the heel to the pelvis.
Yeah.
And the damage he lists is crushed testicles in males, a fractured pelvis, and internal damage to the groin area.
Oh, my God.
And this could potentially lead to permanent crippling.
Yeah.
So again, very, very severe consequences.
Yeah, you can definitely see how these techniques are designed to completely incapacitate an attack.
Absolutely. And that focus on causing really serious and long-lasting damage. It continues with number 12, which is a front snap kick delivered with the shin to the testicles.
Right, to the groin.
Yeah, exactly. And again, he mentions crushed testicles, a cracked pelvis, and the possibility of permanent crippling, often requiring surgery to repair the damage. So you can see he's not shying away from the graphic details.
Yeah, it's pretty intense stuff. So are there any examples of these techniques using kicks other than the front snap kick?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Like number 15 is a side kick aimed at the throat.
Okay.
And it actually mirrors the front snap kick to the same area in terms of potential damage. So again, crushed throat, fractured Adam's apple, and a high likelihood of death if the attacker doesn't receive immediate medical care.
Wow, so the side kick can be just as deadly as the front snap kick.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not only used for those high targets, like number 14 is a side snap kick directed at the ribs.
Okay.
And the potential damage there is fractured ribs, internal injuries, damage to the lungs, and the attacker would be unable to stand or breathe effectively.
So again, very debilitating, even if it's not immediately fatal.
Exactly. Now, shifting our focus to the head, number 16 is a side kick to the jaw.
Ouch.
Yeah, this one could cause a broken jaw and a temporary loss of consciousness. So the attacker would be knocked out for several minutes and would need medical attention for the fracture. Then numbers 17 and 18 are side kicks to the face and shin, respectively. And they list similar types of damage, broken nose teeth being knocked out, fractured jaw. And again, the outcome is usually that the attacker is knocked unconscious.
Okay, so it seems like there are a lot of techniques that are designed to knock the attacker out rather than necessarily killing them.
Yeah, that's true. But there are still plenty that could be fatal. Like number 19 is a side kick targeted at the heart. And the damage he describes is a crushed or cracked chest, a fractured sternum, and the possibility of the heart stopping completely. So the attacker could actually die from this. And then number 20 is particularly alarming. It's a side kick to the back of the head, which could potentially cause a broken neck and loss of consciousness. And often this can lead to permanent paralysis or even death.
Wow. Yeah, those are some really serious consequences. So I guess it really highlights just how powerful these techniques can be when they're aimed at those vital areas.
Absolutely. And we're also seeing, a variety of kicks being used. It's not just side kicks and front snap kicks. Like number 21 is a roundhouse kick to the kidneys, which could result in a fractured back and significant internal damage. Then there's number 23, a roundhouse kick to the temple, which could cause a cracked skull and nerve damage. And even a roundhouse kick to the knee, number 26, which again would cause a broken knee and torn ligaments. And unsurprisingly, there are several kicks aimed at the groin numbers 27 and 28, which, he describes the expected damage to the testicles and pelvis and the high likelihood of the attacker being permanently crippled.
Yeah, it's not hard to imagine how devastating those kicks would be. And it's not just the standard kicks either, right?
Right. The knee strike is also presented as a very effective weapon against those vital points. Like number 29 is a knee strike to the face,
Okay.
which could break the nose, crack teeth, fracture the jaw.
Uh-huh.
And then number 30 is a knee to the throat, again with the possibility of crushing the windpipe and causing death. Then there are knee strikes to the coccygus, number 31, and the kidney lower back area, number 32, which would cause severe pain and could lead to long-term damage to the spine and internal organs. So you can see the knee strike is a really versatile technique that can be used against a lot of different targets.
Yeah, and it's probably easier to execute than some of the more complex kicks.
Right, exactly.
Really?
And we shouldn't forget about the stomps.
Oh, yeah, those are in there too.
Yeah, numbers 34 through 40 are all about stomps. And we see them directed at the heart, groin, throat, face, back of head, and lower back. And as you might expect, they're all described with pretty brutal potential consequences, including death in many cases, and also the risk of permanent crippling injuries. So, they're not holding back.
No, definitely not. And then there are the heel kick techniques, right?
Right, exactly. Numbers 41 through 45. And again, they're targeting those really vulnerable areas, the head, temple, back of head, throat, and face. And the potential outcomes are just as severe, ranging from loss of consciousness to death.
Okay, so I think we got a pretty good idea of the range and the potential lethality of these kick attacks.
Yeah, I'd say so. It's a pretty comprehensive overview of how kicks can be used to inflict serious damage. And now we move on to the hand attacks.
All right, bring it on. So what are we looking at here?
Well, he starts off by saying that when executed correctly, these strikes can be just as devastating as the kicks. And again, they're very precisely aimed at specific vital points on the body. So for example, number 48 is a shuto, which is sometimes called a knife hand strike, and it's directed at the throats. So we're back to that crushed throat and potential for death.
Right, so even though it's a hand technique, it can still be just as lethal as a kick.
Exactly. And number 49 is a shuto aimed at the teeth,
Okay.
and that could result in a fractured jaw. And the attacker would either be knocked unconscious or just unable to continue fighting because of the pain and the injury. So again, very effective in terms of stopping an attacker.
Yeah, definitely. So are there any other shuto techniques listed?
Oh, yeah, plenty. Like number 50 is a shuto to the eyes and the bridge of the nose.
Ouch, that doesn't sound good.
No, it doesn't. He says it could cause a broken nose, loss of vision, and a concussion. Then number 51 is aimed at the top of the skull, which could result in a cracked skull and another concussion. And number 54 is a shuto to the side of the neck, which is obviously very dangerous because of the risk of a fractured neck and, disrupting the blood flow to the brain. And then number 58 is a shuto to the back of the neck, again, with that terrifying possibility of a broken neck, permanent paralysis, or even death.
Wow, so it seems like the shuto is a really versatile technique that can be used against a lot of different targets.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can be incredibly dangerous depending on where it's aimed.
So what about the palm heel?
Yeah, what about that? Is that in there too?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
He describes several palm heel strikes against vital areas.
Yeah.
Like number 61 is a palm heel to the face.
Oh, which again could result in a broken nose, a fractured jaw, and teeth being knocked out. Number 63 is a palm heel strike to the throat, which again carries the risk of death. Then there's number 64, a palm heel to the heart, which could cause cardiac arrest and a fatal outcome. And number 66 is a palm heel to the back of the head with the same grim possibilities of a broken neck, permanent paralysis, or death.
Right, so it's like the palm heel is kind of like a blunt force trauma weapon almost.
Yeah, exactly. And then, of course, we have the elbow.
Ah, yes, the elbow.
Always a favorite. Number 68 is an elbow strike to the face, which is very likely to cause a broken jaw and nose, as well as knocking out teeth and probably requiring surgical repair. Number 69 is a direct elbow to the throat.
Oof.
Yeah, that one is likely to result in death because of the crushing of the airway. Number 74 is an elbow to the back of the neck with the familiar dangers of a broken neck, permanent paralysis, and possible death. So again, very, very serious consequences.
It's amazing how many of these techniques target the neck. It's clearly a very vulnerable area.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just the obvious techniques like punches and kicks that he covers. There's also the ridge hand strike.
Okay, what's that?
Well, number 75 is a ridge hand to the solar plexus, which could cause fractured ribs and really disrupt the attacker's breathing. Number 78 is a ridge hand to the back of the head, which again risks a broken neck and a fatal outcome.
Oh.
And number 80 is a ridge hand to the throat with the same deadly potential we've seen with so many other strikes to that area. So again, it's about using different parts of your hand to target those vulnerable spots.
Right. And it shows how even a seemingly basic technique like a punch can be incredibly dangerous when it's aimed correctly.
Exactly. Like number 83 is a punch to the groin, which could fracture the pelvis and lead to crippling. Then there's number 84, a punch to the heart, which risks cardiac arrest and death. Number 85, a punch to the throat again with that fatal potential. And number 91, a punch to the back of the neck with the very familiar and frightening risk of a broken neck paralysis and death. So it's all about precision and knowing where to strike.
Yeah, for sure. And I see there are even techniques specifically for the eyes.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Like number 92 is a two-finger eye strike, which could lead to permanent loss of vision. And then numbers 93 and 94 describe one-finger eye strikes and thumb gouges with similar devastating consequences for the attacker's eyesight. And number 95 is a double eye gouge, which is highly likely to cause irreversible blindness. So, these are techniques that are designed to permanently disable an attacker.
Wow. Yeah, those are some brutal techniques.
Yeah.
And are there any other kind of less conventional strikes listed?
Oh, yeah, there are a few. Like number 96 is an eardrum strike, which can rupture the eardrums and also fracture the jaw. So it would cause a lot of pain and also throw the attacker off balance. Then number 98 is a headbutt to the bridge of the nose, which could break the nose, knock out teeth, and even crack the skull. So you can see how effective a well-placed headbutt can be.
Yeah, definitely. And then finally we have number 100.
Right, the grand finale.
What's that one?
It's a two-handed strike to the back of the neck. Yeah, and with the by now predictable risk of a broken neck paralysis and death. So it's a pretty fitting end to this, extensive and really sobering catalog of techniques.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in. So after all of these detailed descriptions of individual moves, Dr. Gambordella includes a whole chapter on street fighting applications.
Yeah, he does. And he actually starts this section with an even stronger warning than before.
Really?
Yeah, he's really emphasizing that these techniques should absolutely not be used in any kind of street fight unless your life or the life of someone else is in immediate and mortal danger.
Right, so like if someone's just trying to steal your wallet, you shouldn't be, going for a throat strike.
Exactly. And he stresses that the examples he provides are purely for training purposes, to encourage serious martial arts students and instructors to think about how these devastating techniques could be applied in those extreme life or death situations.
Right. So let's take a look at some of these scenarios. What kind of situations does he describe?
Well, the first one is pretty simple. It involves someone standing by their car when they're suddenly attacked by someone wielding a crowbar. And the response he describes is a very swift front kick to the attacker's throat.
Wow. So right to the most vulnerable area.
Yeah, straight to the point.
Yeah.
And the second scenario is even more intense. It involves a couple getting into their car when they're suddenly attacked by two thugs, both armed with crowbars.
Oh, wow. So they're outnumbered.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And the response he describes is both the man and the woman reacting with powerful kicks. The man delivers a side kick to the face of one attacker, and the woman does a back kick to the groin of the other attacker, and then they follow up with stomps to the throat and neck of the attackers.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, so it's a very aggressive and very final response. They're making sure that those attackers are completely neutralized.
Yeah, it's a pretty brutal scenario. But I guess it highlights how quickly things can escalate in a situation like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Then the third scenario involves a couple walking down the street when they're confronted by two thugs. And the response he outlines is the man using a shuto or knife hand strike to the neck of one attacker, and the woman doing a snap kick to the groin of the other attacker. And then they follow up with the man stomping on his attacker's groin and the woman delivering a knee strike to her attacker's face.
So again, they're using a combination of techniques to quickly overwhelm the attacker.
Exactly. And the next scenario he describes involves a woman being grabbed from behind in an attempted sexual assault.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And the response he outlines is a series of escalating kicks. It starts with a roundhouse kick to the attacker's groin, then immediately a heel kick to the throat to bring the attacker down, and then a final incapacitating stomp to the head. So it's basically a progression of force designed to stop the attack as quickly as possible.
Right. So it's not just about, going straight for the kill. It's about using the appropriate level of force to neutralize the threat.
Exactly. Then he describes a couple of scenarios that take place at a car wash. And they're both pretty brutal and really focus on overwhelming multiple attackers. So in one scenario, there are two attackers, and the described defense is a side kick to the throat of one attacker, followed by a punch to the jaw of the other. Then an elbow smash to the jaw of the first attacker, and finally stomps to the groin of both attackers.
Wow, so it's a really rapid and complex series of moves.
Yeah, exactly. And then the final scenario involves someone being grabbed from behind in a bear hug by one of two attackers, and the sequence of defensive moves he describes is a snap kick to the groin of the attacker in front, then a rear lift kick to the groin of the attacker holding them, then an elbow smash to the face of the first attacker, a stomp to the face of the second attacker, and finally a shuto or knife hand strike to the throat of the remaining attacker. So again, it's a very complex and very quick series of techniques designed to neutralize those multiple threats simultaneously.
Yeah, it's amazing how you can even break down these kind of chaotic situations into such specific steps.
Yeah, he's very methodical in his approach. And it's important to remember what we said before about these scenarios. They're purely for training purposes, to help people understand how these techniques could be used in those extreme life or death situations. But we're definitely not advocating for their use in any other context.
Right, of course. So as we wrap up this deep dive into Dr. Gambordella's 100 Deadliest Karate Moves, we've basically explored this incredibly comprehensive and honestly kind of disturbing array of techniques that are specifically designed to target pretty much every vital point on the human body.
Yeah, it's been a pretty intense journey, and the descriptions of the potential damage, the broken bones, crushed organs, loss of consciousness, and even death are very stark and very sobering.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess the main takeaway here has to be the seriousness of this material, and Dr. Gambordella's repeated and very clear warnings about when and how it should be used. This book is not a guide for self-defense in any kind of normal situation. It's really a reference for understanding the extreme potential for causing harm, and that knowledge should only be used as a last resort when facing a truly life-threatening situation.
Exactly. And it really makes you think about the responsibility that comes with studying this kind of material, even if it's purely for intellectual curiosity or as a theoretical reference.
Yeah, definitely. And that actually brings us to a final thought for you, our listener. Given the incredibly detailed and potentially devastating nature of these techniques, what kind of responsibility do you think comes with studying them, even if it's purely for intellectual understanding or as a theoretical reference? And how does this exploration of the human body's vulnerabilities, as outlined in this book, change your perspective on self-defense and the use of force in general?
Yeah, those are some pretty deep questions to ponder.
Definitely. So thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the source material you provided. We hope it's been informative and thought-provoking, even if it's been a little bit unsettling at times.
It certainly has been.
Thanks again for listening.
And stay safe out there.
Yeah, please do.